You are now listening to the Happily Ever Banter podcast. Let's go!
That was legit.
What's up, Kiki?
What's up, Uncle Dale?
We are here to film episode 11, and we got some special guests that are going to join us on online. This is a remote episode, but we have Tommy and Dianne McCollister. I found them on Instagram. They have some really cool videos and content they have around marriage and faith and family that we've seen. And then they have his High Level Husbands program that he has. And I know I've shared some videos with you of stuff that they've done. So
Yeah, I've watched a few, and so I'm looking forward to see what all they have to say, and what we can learn from it,
Yeah, I'm excited. I got some questions written down just from following for a while. I got some questions I want to ask him. I guess I got some things that I like to ask his advice on, to see if he can help us out, maybe give us some starting points and some things that I have some questions on, and see what kind of advice he could give to us that ourselves can work on.
Other couples can work on.
Yeah, other couples that listen that you may struggle with the same things as us. I mean, hey, everybody's a lot of the same, deal with the same thing. May not be able to talk about it, but if we can talk about it, our struggles, it can help you guys out. We're hoping that's what we get out of this, and then we can find some things to move forward on. So, like I said, I think they just joined the studio, so we are going to let Tommy and Dianne in and get episode 11 started. What is up? We got the McCollisters here for episode 11. Miss Dianne and Tommy McCollister. How y'all doing?
We're doing great.
Yeah.
How you guys doing?
Good. So this is my wife, Crystal.
Hi.
She goes by Kiki.
Yes.
So, yeah, I've been following you for a while, Tommy. I've seen your content, and I always like this stuff about marriage and things like that. So that kind of would draw me to you, and then I started checking you out. Then you followed me back, and we've been talking here and there. So glad to get you guys on.
Yeah, no, we're stoked to be on. I mean, obviously, I've been checking out some of your stuff too, and especially one of the reels I saw from the other podcast today with the grill. That one got me because I did a reel with the filter earlier this year when I had the grill in and was doing the whole thing. So
it's fun sometimes.
Yeah, we're in Houston. That's a big deal over here in Houston.
Yeah.
The grills. Where are you guys at?
We're just outside of Las Vegas in Henderson, Nevada.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
We've only been here for almost 4 years. We were from Northern California forever, but ironically enough, so I'm 43, but in my early 20s, I was a rapper. So when Paul Wall was doing his thing, I was a white rapper doing my thing. So I was all about like when he was doing his stuff, and so I'm definitely up on like the culture and stuff.
So
like that.
is your stuff available to look at back then if you're a rapper? Like a
I think it's still out there somewhere, but that was before like Spotify and like all that.
Okay.
Now that's when you actually had to hustle out the trunk,
Yeah, so y'all are right around our age. I'm 41 and he's 40.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I'm 42.
Okay.
Was Diana a video girl? That's how you met her? No.
She was one of the many, I just chose her out of all the ones and said she'll do it.
I pick her.
Yeah. I got to settle down now, so I just take you.
I'm sure that was a crazy time. That was back late 90s, early 2000s, I guess.
Yeah, early
Yeah.
2000s. So yeah, it was a wild time in so many different ways. I mean, a good time in a lot of things, good memories. But at the same time, like
We got to grow up.
yeah, I wasn't doing necessarily the best things at that time. So I'm definitely a different person now.
Well, I guess for people that don't know who you guys or do follow you, I'd like to know a little bit about you guys as a couple, what you guys do, how long you've been together, things like that. Just kind of let everybody know about you guys.
Yeah. So like you said, we live in just outside of Las Vegas. We've been together for 25 years, married for 17. We run a business called High Level Husband, where we create high level husbands who are on fire for God, respect themselves, and are irresistible to their wives. Is the business that we do. We do a ton of content. As you were saying, Dale, that's kind of how you've seen us. And so we just kind of our business is through social media and whatnot. We have 2 kids, 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. And that's kind of about us. We moved to Vegas, like I said, 4 years ago after like a crazy near-death experience where we had to get out of California and whatnot. And so then it's been just a wild ride ever.
Is that because of the fires?
No, not because of the
Okay,
fires.
okay.
Ironically enough, they're like, we were in Northern California, so they were probably like 3 hours from where we
Yeah.
were. So nothing
Okay.
like dangerous near us, but they're obviously
Okay,
we're
good.
paying for them.
So how long have y'all had the podcast?
So
Not
our
podcast.
No, not podcast. I'm sorry, not I'm silly.
No, you're good.
What do you call it?
High level husbands.
Yeah, high level husbands.
The coaching. So we've had
Yeah.
that. We've been we started
2
coaching.
years.
Yeah, 3.5 years ago we started coaching, full force, like where it was only just personal development, marriage stuff for a little over 2 years on that. But we went from the transition from being online fitness and nutrition, and then that slowly transitioned to mindset, and slowly into marriage.
Oh, I love
and
fitness. We're big
that's
into
just where,
fitness.
That's where we were go.
Oh, did we freeze?
That's when
So y'all mentioned that y'all do
We did.
nutrition and fitness.
Yeah, we started off in fitness and nutrition.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just always been a huge part of my life, as I just love working out and things like that.
Same
And
for
then-
us. We're CrossFitters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Very
Good
cool.
for you guys.
Yeah, so then you guys know, like, it just becomes who you are. And so
Right.
everybody was always asking me questions about it and stuff. And so when we were getting ready to move, we started the online business. And then when we moved to Vegas, we were doing that full time. But after a while, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever coached anybody, and there's only so much you can talk about macros and sets and things like that before you want to put your head in the door and slam the door, So, so we slowly, and we just started realizing where people were struggling at was mainly mindset. That's why they weren't in the healthiest of shape. And so we grew that. And then we switched over to the marriage just because we've always had a really good marriage.
Yeah. People would ask us so often.
About
That was what the need was.
Yeah, so it's just a wild, I feel like, so faith's a huge part of our life. God kept just calling us to the next thing and to the next thing. And then now,
That's awesome.
once when we were doing the online fitness nutrition stuff, we really only had like maybe 5,000 followers. And like literally as soon as we went full force into relationship,
yeah.
like within like the first few weeks, we had like a couple 100,000 followers on multiple platforms. So it was just weird. It was like, this is what we
Yeah.
were supposed to be doing. It finally clicked.
And I think a lot of people like to hear that, like the different dynamics on people's relationships. Like, we've been together for
We're been together 22 years.
22.
We married 17 this
Right.
year, so we're right,
Okay.
right by you guys.
y'all.
Yeah.
So we have a daughter that is, I'm so bad at ages, y'all. It's terrible. My daughter is 12.
13.
13.
Oh, my
See, I told
goodness.
you 13 and 11.
What's up, Kiki? Nice shades you got there.
Thank you. They're my new Goodert shades.
Nice.
Yeah, you know what I like about them?
What you like?
No slip, all polarized, no bounce. I'm into fitness. I'm into running and walking and doing whatever, and they do not move.
Yeah, Kiki's actually been wearing these for years. She's had it multiple styles. For $25, I was like, I didn't get mad at her for shopping, for buying more of these as she would. So they asked us about being an episode sponsor, and so we were like, hey, let's do it. We already use the product. For $25, it's a great thing to put out to our HEB Pod listeners to take advantage of. With over 50,000 5-star reviews, you can't go wrong with Gooder sunglasses. And they got some crazy names, too. The Back Nine Blackouts, Crystals, what's the name of those?
Mine is the Flamingo Booze Cruise.
And they got donkey goggles. I don't know who's in charge of the name of the glasses, but I could do that job. So, but yeah, they're the new episode sponsor for HB Pod today, episode 11. So if you want to support the show and try a pair of Gooder, they're giving the Happily Ever Banter podcast listeners free shipping. Go to gooder.com/HEBpod and use our code HEBpod for free shipping. Good offers a 30-day money-back guarantee and 100% satisfaction. Again, that's gooder.com/HEBpod and use the code HEBpod, HEBPOD for free shipping today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Last thing I
Okay.
heard was when your daughter was 12.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, well,
yes.
she's
No,
13.
she's actually 13. And my son's 11. I'm so terrible at ages.
Totally understand.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you that question. Like, so what made you dive into the marriage and relationships? That was just because people were asking for it, or did you guys have anything that kind of prompted that, or you just felt like we have a message that we can get out there?
I think a little bit of
bit of both,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah, because we were in the coaching space already. That means, so we had our own coaches that were helping us grow our business and things like that. And so we were already in multiple different spaces with other people, and they kept telling us, like, you guys need to go to the marriage space. You guys need to go to the marriage space. You need to go to the marriage space. They just kept telling us that. And it was it just seemed like, I don't know, because we're technically not therapists or counselors, so I don't know if that's really what we're supposed to be doing. But I mean, what better to get advice from and know what it is from people who are actually doing it and making it work, And
Right.
so we slowly, when we switched, it was probably because everybody was pushing us who are already in like coaching spaces. And so when we switched, it just hit. And so it's been a wild ride, but it's been like a good one. And we totally coach different than probably most people.
Well, you got real life. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's better than going to a therapist that's divorced and unhappy, and they're trying to tell you about your marriage. I'm sure. I mean, there's no health in that either.
So ever since we started our podcast, like all the feedback that we're getting back from people, like they love just how real and raw. They love just hearing the real stuff that's between people that are married. For so long. The good stuff, the bad stuff.
Yeah, we talk about
all kind of stuff.
Financial issues you had or have. Just certain different struggles you have is just. As a normal married couple from being together since we were 19 years old. And we actually, we grew up together. Some of y'all, you grew up together.
Yeah.
And you change every so often years, so a lot of things change. And if you're not changing or adapting with your spouse, I'm sure I was going to ask you about that. That's probably a reason why you see a lot of failed marriages and issues because of people not growing together,
Yeah, 100%, So I have this line that I always use when I speak on stage. And so I'll give you the context of it because poor Diane's always the blunt of the joke. But I always say, last year my wife had sex with 12 different men. Yeah. And what I mean by that is that in January, I was one man. In February, I became another man. In March, I was a different man. The same thing. Like Diane becomes a different woman all the time because we're so growth driven, whether that's on our faith or our fitness or our mindset and things like that. We're always growing. Whereas that's what we see in so many relationships is they get married and they take that as like, it's the finish line, right? Like, well, now it's time to focus on the kids and the business and things, or we can let ourselves go because we kind of already got the prize.
Oh, yeah.
And then that's when they plateau, right? If you're not growing, you're dying.
Well, like I guess like I see, like same with y'all. We're into fitness. We want to, we want to look good. I mean, the whole thing you work out for is to look good naked. There ain't no doubt. I mean, that's the whole point of working out. I feel, aside of staying healthy. But it really is something that's big for us. Is just staying healthy and always trying to stay lustful after each other. I think that's the biggest part. You let yourself go. You're like, man, I don't know why they're not attracted to me. Well, you let yourself go and you're unattracted to anybody. So how you think they just got to force themselves to love you? It's just, I think that's fair for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. They fell in love with you for a reason to begin with. And that's the way that you should stay. We should only get better.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's in multiple areas. Yeah. It's like, one of the things is people always like, man, like I get obviously an insane amount of messages from people like, well, how do I fix my marriage? Like I've been doing the chores and I'm doing the laundry and like, I'll make dinner for her and like I buy her flowers, but she still don't like love me and won't have sex with me and like all these stuff. And I'm like, dude, because what if that was your Tinder profile that said, hey, I'm the best at the chores? Not one girl is going to say like, dude, I love you. You're just amazing.
Yeah. That's the guy I want.
Yeah. I'm guilty of that. I don't do any of that crap.
So we've been together, 20 years. And so like we have a method though, like he does all the cooking because I've never cooked. Because I've never tried because he's always done the cooking. So I've always done the cleaning, taking care of the house. So like there's been a handful of times where like he'll do some of the chores and he'll tell me, hey, like I did this, I did that. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Take me to the bedroom or something? I
don't do it much. I was like, I don't know. I feel guilty sometimes, but it's not in my DNA to do it. I don't know.
But that works for us, he cooks, I clean, I take care of the house. So, you participate in the kids a lot. So, that helps, I guess it kind of makes
we're super involved with the kids.
Right. You guys find the roles that work.
Y'all got
That's what I was gonna
16,
say.
13
For you guys,
years
it's
old.
the same way. Like,
busy,
I don't do a whole lot of chores. I help out here to there. Diane actually still does majority of the cooking too, and all of that. But I have like all the other things that I'm doing like in the business because we run it together. I would probably say I'm like 80% of the business.
Yeah.
And so she knows that, hey, she's going to crush it over here. You crush it over there. So, and there's no resentment because we've talked about it. So if I'm not over there just banging out dishes, she's not like, you should be over here doing dishes. She knows where I'm supposed to be and all these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we talked about it,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
we're good with it. And I'm winning in other areas. So if I'm not winning in any other areas, then I'm still fun to be around and all these things. It's like, it works out that way. And it kind of sounds like that's how it is for you guys.
I think that's where a lot of people get frustrated too, though, because they don't talk about it. So then the other person's over there like fuming, well, they're not helping me do this, And then it's like, well, just talk about it. Define your roles in your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we kind of set that even early on in our relationship. So it wasn't like it's something new to where I was always doing that and I just stopped. It was just like, hey, you do this well, I do this well, and we divide
Keep
and
it like
conquer.
that, right?
Yeah. Amen to that. It's just so weird though in like marriage. I mean, I'm assuming, for you guys, it seems like you guys enjoy each other because you wouldn't be doing a podcast and you guys are,
Right.
doing all these other things that are successful together. A lot of couples, what we see is they just don't even know each other because they don't actually talk that much other than about like, hey, we got to pay this bill next week. And
The kids got this going on.
yeah, they talk about all the surface level stuff and like, that's cool. But then you don't really know each other on a personal level. And then it's like that. I think that's the number one question we usually ask, whether that's on a consultation or things like that, as well as how much quality time do you guys actually spend together? Not just watching TV or having dinner with the kids and being at their baseball practices. Like, how much time do you guys actually just spend daily? Most of them are like, oh, never. And I'm like, well, there's your problem because you can't tell her what's going on in your head. And you don't, then you just build up these thoughts. Then you get resentment and it's not even the truth what's going on.
Yeah, we're actually we're pretty good for taking the time out and just having alone time. And we're very good about that because sometimes I'm like, I need it. I've had enough of the kids. Let's get some time together.
We spend a lot of time together. And one thing I heard you talk about, which is important, you talked about the not having the kids in your bed. We never did. We were a big proponent of like, hey, dude, no, this is mommy and daddy's spot. You don't need to be in my bed. And we have friends that do the other thing. They got kids that are 10 years old still sleeping in their bed, which it blows my mind because I can't even imagine.
Or still sleeping on the floor.
Yeah, and so I heard you talk about that. And we always, I talk to my friends saying they shouldn't do that as well. I just don't feel like that's healthy for a relationship either. Trying to have a kid in your bed the whole time. And I like how you broke it down. If you want to kind of talk about that.
Oh yeah, that one.
Agree.
I mean, it's so true. But dude, that one brought out the worst of the worst people.
Because a lot of people that we talk to, they're like, but they're only little for so long, I mean, there was a handful of times that they were, if they didn't feel good, but I mean other than that, they were
10 years,
exactly
maybe 4 times in my bed, which I get that, but I'm talking about every night sleeping in your bed. Like, no, that ain't. I don't play that.
Same thing, right? Like
crazy.
it's one thing if it's like they're sick. They had a bad dream, something like that, and they came in, but it's not like just every night. And then it does create a distance between the
you
parents.
and your spouse.
Yeah, it really, really does.
Yeah.
And I mean, and we took it from the angle of like, it's good to teach the kids that they have their space, right? Like, hey, you don't need to always be comforted by mom and dad all day. Like, that's good for them to learn their boundaries.
Self-soothe themselves.
Yeah, and
even
soothe
as they're growing up.
And so many things. It's so we've just found that important. It's because we have a hierarchy in marriage, what we always say, and we've just found it works really, really good for us and then the people we work with. And I'll just break it down because there's one part you probably think's crazy, but it goes God, self, marriage, kids, and then business is like the level of priorities, right? So God, number one, self-explanatory. Self, number 2 is where we always say it has to be number 2, but that's not so like I can go out and drink beers with the boys and eat buffalo wings. It's like, so I can be number 2, I have to make sure that I'm spiritually and physically and mentally on point. So then when I come to the marriage, I'm bringing a full cup.
Right.
Then she brings a full cup, and then our 2 full cups overflow onto the kids. And so they get to see an amazing marriage. They get to see us laughing, joking, touching, all of that, not arguing. And then they get the best of that, right? And then when all that's good, then it flows onto the business. But we see so many people who put the kids above everything.
Yeah.
And I get it.
And
but
business.
it just ruins it because then those kids are going to go one day, or even if they're in the house still and the marriage is frustrated, they're arguing, they're seeing you argue. All they're being shown is what a mediocre marriage or a bad marriage is like. I would rather have the kids get 20% less attention from me, but get to see 100% amazing marriage, and then they'll hold those standards for when they go to a marriage. And so it's just part of teaching them, right, rather than just like cuddling the whole time. So that's kind of why we preach on that.
Yeah, I figured that could bring some different levels of comments on that on that reel you posted, huh? I didn't look at the comments,
no.
but I can imagine that could probably trigger some people.
Mainly, it's funny because I post all the same content on all the different platforms, but it was like TikTok on this one. It was
Really?
like probably 1,000 messages of like how terrible of a person I am. They feel so bad for our kids and like all this stuff.
Wow.
And it was just like, I get it. But then if those people really would give us the 100% honest answer of where their marriage was at, I guarantee probably 90% of those people don't have a good marriage, or they're divorced, and because some people are like, oh, our kids will always come first, right? But that's because they're probably hurting in other areas and their marriage isn't good. So why would they want to put their marriage first? I'll do the one thing that is winning for me, so I'll just make sure I can win with them because my marriage isn't doing it. So it's just, I get why they say it, but if they had done it the right way in the beginning and all the other areas too, then it probably wouldn't be in the position they're at.
Yeah, I could see where if it's all about the kids all the time, how a marriage could struggle, or you're doing that to mask marriage problems, like trying to stay. I could see that because we both came from divorced homes. But for us, man, we've always been. I mean, we've been together a long time. We have a good time. We laugh. We joke. We show. We love each other in front of the kids. We're loving with our kids. So, like I said, I think we want to break that cycle, obviously, to where they see a good, healthy relationship, because I feel like that's going to help them shape to be young adults better than anything else. Just seeing the love that we have for each other, and we like to have a good time and do stuff together, versus we sit in a room side by side, don't talk to each other, and all we do is care about bringing them places, and we don't talk. So I can see that being a big part of having a healthy marriage. I mean, hell, it works for us. So, I mean, like I said, I guess same thing for you guys. You're preaching what works for you guys, which that's what people are asking. What do y'all do? So,
well, it's supposed to be fun, right? Like you said, we like to have a good time together. Like, I thought about this a while ago, and it wasn't something we ever were taught, but it's like, remember when we were kids, all we wanted to do was like sleep over at our best friend's house, and we would just have a great time. Isn't that what marriage should be, is that we get to sleep at our best friend's house at all times? Like, we don't got to ask for permission. We get to be with them. Like, shouldn't we be having fun and cracking jokes and like playing games and all of that? Why does life got to be so like stressful at all times?
Yeah.
And so why not show that with the kids? I mean, it seems like you guys have a good time with each other and all of that. And so I think people just take life sometimes too stressful, like, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah,
it's no
too
need
uptight.
it to be,
Yeah, I keep it pretty. I mean, both do. We're pretty lighthearted. I mean, hell, you've seen the stuff I do on my other podcasts. It really, like with that one, even with us, we press record and we go and just have a good time and talk. So I try not to take a lot of things too serious. There's definitely serious times to be, but on the most part, it's let's be positive and have a good time, and that just people want to be around that. I'm sure with you guys having a healthy marriage and people see that, I'm sure other couples want to be. They kind of draw to you guys as friends in a couple.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, that's why and just in life, that's why all the friends that we hang out with are people who are similar to us, right? Like, they're growth driven in most areas.
Yeah.
They're growing in their faith or their business, but they also just have a great marriage as well, and they just enjoy each other. Because isn't that the type of people we want to hang out with? Nobody wants to hang out with anybody that's just negative all the time and and all of that. And so we don't want that in our friendships. Why would we want that in our marriage? So it's just wild how it's gotten to this point. It's sad because divorce rate's so bad. I saw a stat the other day or recently too, and it was like, out of the 50% that stay married, only 15% of them are actually happy, say that they're in a happy marriage, right? So it's wild that if you get married, you're looking at a 15% where you only be happy,
So sad.
It's crazy that it's that way.
Yeah.
It's sad, but I mean, that's the fun part about social media too, is couples like you and us, and I mean, to show that there is a better way.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
Big example.
it doesn't have to be the way you think it actually is.
Yeah, because it's crazy. Like, we'll talk to certain people, and they'll congratulate you, like, for being together that long, because, like you said, like, there's divorce rate is so high, so they're like, they just really appreciate still seeing young couples still together, Well, I mean, we're not young anymore, but
We are.
Sure we are. Speak for your own self.
My man's got a grill over here. He got a grill. He's young.
Hey, dude, I still act like I'm 12, bro. Trust me.
Oh, I know, it's crazy though, because like, I mean, I don't feel like I'm 41, There's certain times maybe your body might, but overall, like, we have the same personality. We cut up. We love to have a good time. We love being around people,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll keep it that way.
Yeah, no, man, it's just life. Life ain't that serious, man. Like, there's things to be serious about, like I told you about, but it's just I don't know. The negativity and things like that drive me crazy. So I like to have fun and make sure that around me have fun as well. Just having a positive energy, Hey, one question.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? What's your thoughts on, like, I guess the biggest drivers these days for divorce?
I mean, you would think it would be like no intimacy and things like that, right?
Oh yeah, I got a question on that too.
Because I would say it's wild. Like, we do a lot of. I think we're going to start cutting back, but we do a lot of content on intimacy because it's just wild. Like, anytime we do touch on intimacy, they go viral, right? And so it's become a marketing thing. But so intimacy is a big one in marriage. But honestly, to be real with you, what we found out in like marriage of like how we coach is like, that's why we coach individuals, is like when you can fix the individual. I hate to use the word fix, but like when you can get people to grow them and actually love themselves, then they can love their partner, right? But if they don't love their life, if they're not enough in themselves, then you can't, right? So like the Bible says, that the second most important commandment is love your neighbor as yourself, right? Well, the key part of that statement is as you love yourself, right? So if you don't love yourself, that's all the amount of love you can give to somebody else. And so when you can be enough in yourself, like we have always said a while back, this is one of our favorite moments, is we were in a coaching atmosphere and I said, we have a 10 out of 10 marriage, but I don't need Diane. And she said, and I don't need him. Because of that, there's no pressure, there's no expectations. Yeah. We just have fun because I'm 100% cool enough with who I am and whose I am, fulfilled. Yeah. I love life. I know my purpose. Like, I take care of myself. I'm so good. Well, then I don't have anything pressure from her because she's the same thing, and so we're just good. So what we see in marriage, and why I think it leads to divorce, is they just become unhappy, and they're looking for somebody to blame for their unhappiness, right? So maybe they work in a career that they don't love, right? And it's the grind every week. Maybe they've let
themselves go.
Yeah, they've let themselves go. Their faith life has gotten lukewarm. Their friends in their life are not really probably all the same, right? And so they're like, well, I'm doing my best, so it can't be me. It must be my spouse, because we argue, not understanding the reason that they're arguing is because they're stressed and unfulfilled. So when their wife says something, they think it's a personal attack rather than understanding maybe she's just mentioning something. Right. So then he takes it out on her, right? And then that becomes the same thing. And so what we really feel it is, and what we see is it's like, it's the unfilled individual that's leading to it. And so then they're just looking for the grass is going to be greener on the other side. So I'll just get divorced and find the other person, which is why you see multiple divorces.
Because they just bring it to the next one.
Yeah, so why we always say is fix your problems in this marriage or you're going to have to fix them in the next. But either way, you're going to have the same problems,
Yeah, especially because, like I said, most of the problems will point back to that person, It's not always the other person's problem. They're just projecting it out,
Yeah.
Yeah. You talked about the intimacy. Yeah, I did see some of your stuff. So I guess I'll say full transparency. So me and Crystal, we've always had a great sex life. We've always had a lot of sex, and she would always, or we'd say something, in front of friends, and her friends would always give her crap about it. I'm like, well, dude, don't try to get into my relationship or try to give her crap about it. But I think there's a lot of our friends and stuff like that don't have sex enough to where I feel like that's an extremely important part of our bond and our connection.
They'll
for me,
sit and ask us, and they're like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, compared to what they have, is maybe like a few times a month or something. I said, "Well, my Dale would be it would be a 10 out of 10,
Well, like I said,
he'd be letting all that anger out, all that other stuff you were saying.
Like you said,
he wouldn't be happy with himself.
Hey, we've done the love language test, and mine was touch and feel and things like that. And I know that's a big part of most men. That's a love language and driver for a lot of men. And when they don't get that, you can easily feel like, oh, she don't love me or this or that, and you could resent your spouse. Or the ones that use that, like you talked about, as a weapon, which I that would drive me crazy. Like the things like, oh, well, give you a silent treatment, not having sex or whatever. I just don't feel like that should be something used. That's not something to be used lightly in those kind of instances.
Yeah. No, and kudos to you
Good
guys.
for you guys, yeah.
For doing it. Because you're showing possibility for other people, though, too, because nobody signed up for a sexless marriage. But even in the person that maybe is the one that's reserved, because I think you're right. Like in men, whether you're mad or you're not.
Oh, yeah,
we do work with some wives who are like, yo, my husband won't sleep with me.
Wow.
It's weird. Yeah, so it's more common than you think, but most of the men are like, yo, I can go at any time, you know, whether anything, and I'm ready to rock. But just even the women who are the ones who are closed off, it's not like they chose that or wanted that. They're probably like also what we were talking about, unhappy in themselves in certain ways. We noticed that in our sex life, we would still have plenty of sex when we were more of in like a lukewarm phase of like each of our personal lives. But I mean, I'd love to, you'd almost touch on like.
Yeah, I mean, I think so many women, just like I was years ago, they lack so much confidence in themselves. They're not happy with the way they look. They've kind of let themselves go. They're so busy being the mom, you know, that they don't concentrate on fulfilling themselves. So they don't want to come to the marriage and have sex because they're not confident and don't want their partner to see them undressed, you know, and things like that. So I think that brings a lot of the issues to the intimacy too with the women.
Because she specifically was, for a while there, it was like
lights had to be off.
Yeah, the lights had to be off when we had sex. Like only certain positions because she didn't want me to see her body in certain ways, and she was like, she maybe had 5 pounds to lose at best, you know. So it was a weird thing to me. But she at that time she was just not in a good spot mentally, and I wasn't leading myself well, so I wasn't encouraging her like and showing fruit. And so I think that's where a lot of it is, where the women are shut down, is they're just not too stoked on themselves, and then the men don't have that. But it's crazy because you mentioned the love languages, and so we have our little own twist on that. Is what we've realized is the love languages are a real thing, but if you do quality time as number one and you get that to be the number one love language, you will understand and know your partner so well that you'll want to do physical touch, that you'll want to do acts of service, that you'll want to buy them gifts, that you'll want to affirm them. But if you don't have quality time as number one, the acts of service seem like a chore. The physical touch seems like a chore because you really don't know your partner, so you don't really want to have sex with them and all that other stuff. So if you can get quality time to number one, it's crazy how all the other things come back, because you'll get all 5 of the love languages rather than just the 1 or 2 that kind of are our thing on that. And so it's just so it's sad when couples get that, because you'd be surprised how many people it's wild like how many sexless marriages are out there.
So what happens, like, I mean, if you're tired, like, what do? You know, like, say, you know, it's been a long day, you know, like you're busy with the kids, you know, some days you're just, you know, you're worn out. I mean, come on, don't get me wrong. I'm sure y'all get worn out too, right? And you just, you know, sometimes it just takes you a minute just to chill out and, like, you know, get in the mood.
Yeah. I mean, usually, you know, even if you don't, me personally, even if I was like feeling tired or something, you know, once you get into it, it's not like, oh, we wish we wouldn't have done that. That was terrible. It's like, you just got to get warmed up a little bit, you know? Then you're good to go.
This is what we always say, like, foreplay starts earlier in the day, you know what I mean?
Right.
We're always
like flirting, touching, butt grabbing, you know, all the stuff
telling each other perverted stuff. So by the time the night comes, if we haven't done it during the day, like the night comes, we've flirted with each other and done so many perverted things that it's like the engines are already revved up, you know? So it's like go time. But if we don't do any of that, then it's like, for some people it is harder to turn on the engine, especially for a lot of women, you know, maybe they've had the bulk load with the kids that night, and it does take women a little bit more to get going. So it is tough. Problem is sometimes that it gets used as like, oh, I'm tired, or my stomach hurts, or things like that. Then you don't know if they're crying wolf or not, because sometimes it is them crying wolf, and then you get frustrated, right? I don't, because it just doesn't happen. But for a lot of men, that is. They're like, well, she's lying.
Hell yeah.
Well, that happens to me sometimes. Okay, I'm tired.
But you're telling the truth, though, right? You're not using it as like a fake thing,
I am telling the I don't know about that. I am telling the truth. And even if you're like on your women's cycle, you know, same thing, you know.
Diane's like, oh wow,
it's totally true.
No, you let it fly. It's all good.
Well, I'm sure when couples come to you, I'm sure you've heard all the things, man, good, bad, and the ugly. I'm sure it's you know, it's probably a lot. So how did most people reach out to you? That's just strictly from your own line, going through and booking something through you. But like, what are some of the most, like, I guess the most common things that people come out to you first? Like, what are the most first things people come out to you and ask you to start helping with?
Yeah, people normally find us just through social media and things like that. And then after that, typically it leads to a DM or something, and then we go back and forth. But majority of the time, it's the man who reaches out to us and is A, frustrated with the intimacy, or B, that he feels like he's tried everything. He gets no respect from his wife or anything like that.
Yeah.
Majority of the times, it's those two things. But what's interesting is a lot of people reach out, but then it's clear why they're in that spot, because they just want advice, but they want you to tell them like a magic pill, or you want them to validate their feelings, but they don't ever actually want to do anything for it.
Yeah, like 2 sentences in a DM is going to fix their marriage or something, right?
Right. Hey, just tell me how to fix this, and I'm like, bro, like
it's more than that.
Wave the magic wand, and your marriage is there. I wish I'd be a bazillionaire, right?
Click your heels,
But so we honestly work with a lot of CEOs, professional athletes, people like that, because they're willing to, I hate to say it, but
they're disciplined already.
They're willing to, and they know it takes an investment
work
of their time and money to get it. And so they're like, cool, what's the process? Here it is. I want to fix this. All right, cool, let's go. And then they'll do the work, and then they get the results. But anybody who's dragging their feet or just wants free advice or things like that, I always tell Diane, I go, well, that's why they're where they're at, because they don't want to take action. All they want to do is complain. And so that's typically it. And so, but they have the frustration, and it's one of the things is I can point out right away that A, I don't want to work with them, or B, they'll never get results, is if they come out the gate and they say, my wife, if they just point the finger right away, she's not doing this. But I get a lot of guys who say, hey, here's where my marriage is at. How do I fix this? I need to do better. I can do these things. And when they say I'm like, bro, you're going to win. You can actually change this, because you're willing to recognize some ownership in this as well. But as soon as you point the finger and say, it's not
all
me,
their fault,
you're never going to get any results unless you have like a coming to Jesus
because you can't, if they feel like that's the problem, they're not going to change their wife by talking to you. I mean, that's, or their spouse. They're not going to change them from just having a conversation with you. That's not going to make anything happen. So I think a lot of people just don't put the work in, and it is, like I tell people, marriage is a work. I get it. You got to work at it. You got to adapt and change, like we talked about. I mean, hell, you changed a lot. We changed a lot from 19 to 40. You can imagine. I mean, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and luckily we've kept the love alive and had fun, and we always stayed true to being our silly selves. But I feel like that's what's kind of kept us going, and we have good kids, and they're well mannered and things like that. And we do go to church. We probably don't go to church as much with sports and stuff going on. But I do want to talk to you about that a little bit. I know you guys you're heavily faith based. What do you say? Like I say, so we're a couple that we go to church. To say, I grew up in the church. She grew up in the Catholic Church. I was in a non-denominational church. We found churches as we've gotten older that we both like and go to. But I guess we are believers of God. We are faith-based people. But I wouldn't say I find myself guilty as not putting God first. It's like, it's easy to say I do, but it's not. I can't say I always do. So what would you say to maybe a couple like us? Like, man, what could we do to maybe help with that?
Well, first, I honor you guys just for even being, believers at first and foremost. Yeah. But I will tell you, just from our own experience in our lives, like, why God's so important is, like we said, I had a near-death experience 4 years ago, and I was going through a wilderness period in my life of like 8 years. Too long to get into the story of why, but at the same time, I had more money than I could spend. I had more free time than I could ever even imagine. I was bored out of my mind. I had a beautiful wife, 2 healthy kids, and I literally wanted to climb the roof of my house every day and jump off head first. Yeah. Because as Romans 12:2 talks about in the Bible, do not conform to the patterns of this world. I conformed to the patterns of this world, and I got everything, and I hated my life. And what eventually ended up having, God had almost had to kill me in a bicycle accident. And in that moment was the greatest day of my life, because I was hating my life. And in that moment, I felt God 0% when I was about to be dead. And I was like, oh my God, how did I get to this point? Because I was still going to church and still praying, but I wasn't doing it God's way at all. Yeah. And I realized very quickly that there's no happiness and no real joy in it. And so when we find, it's a long story how we got to where we're at now, but I've seen too many crazy things that almost happen on a daily basis that are unexplainable. And the way that I feel, the joy, the happiness, the possibility, no limitations that are happening in our life, of what's happening from like two people 4 years ago where we were at in life to where we're at now is just mind blowing. And so that's why I always encourage people, is like that God has so much for us. Like Ephesians 3 is one of my favorite verses where he says, God can do immeasurably more than you can ask or imagine. I don't know about y'all. I can imagine and ask some pretty darn big things here, but he says immeasurably more. Most of us just don't actually go and get it. And so what we've noticed with that is that in our relationship, and the same thing with a lot of our clients, is like when we get them yoked together and in the spirit, wild things happen in their life, and then they finally really start finding purpose and fulfillment in so many other areas. And so what we always say is just to like put some actionable steps with that is, one, praying out loud together, especially as a family. We haven't missed a day in over like a year and a half, but
our kids,
with our kids,
us,
whether we're on the road, we're FaceTiming, we're doing things like that. Pray out loud together. I'll tell you, that's a game changer, because the Bible says where 2 or 3 are joined, I'm there with you. And so we pray together out loud every single day, non-negotiable. It's as important to us as it is eating a meal. 2, we read it 1 chapter in the Bible, each of us, every single day, non-negotiable. No matter what's going to happen in our life, we do that every single day. That's changed our life. We have small groups that we're a part of and having some serious like kingdom men, but not the dudes who want to show up and have a cup of tea and wear khaki pants. Like, no, these are dudes who are like ready to get after it and kill for the kingdom. You know?
That's always so hard though, because like we've been in plenty of small groups before, you know, and you always have some people that are like, you know, you have the different dynamics of people.
Well, it's just, you got to find what works for you. But yeah, I do feel like they're called community groups at our church. Right. I do feel like that's a big part. If you I think for my problem has been is I don't let myself be as vulnerable as I should. And I know that's probably just a lot of men, or even men and women, but I know that I hold myself back, and I know I need to do better. And hey, for me, I hope and God don't do something drastic in my life that makes me push to that. But I know that happens to a lot of people. That happens to a lot of people, to where same way they talk about non-believers when they're in their deathbed, they find Christ.
Yeah.
They went their whole life, they don't believe in God or whatever, and then they get to that point, and it takes them that to wake them up, which is that's the end of your road. But I find that for me is more so, I don't know if it's a pride thing. I don't know, man. It's just been something I've struggled with myself.
I think the more that you get vulnerable with your spouse, like when Tommy's talking about like praying together and stuff, the more that we're just comfortable speaking and praying together and getting vulnerable in that, then you're more comfortable get vulnerable in other experiences and with other people and stuff too.
Yeah.
So the men, you're so right with like getting vulnerable with other men. That's the key thing right there, is because you'll get these small groups together, you'll read the Bible, but it kind of stays surface level with like the talks, right? Or maybe what you're sharing, what you're really going through. I mean, I'm kind of going through this, but you're not like, dude, you know what? My wife's cheating on me. I have a severe porn addiction, and I'm about to go bankrupt, and I'm doing this, and this. Like, that's what it should be like, right? If you're going through it.
Right.
And I'm just thankful to have that in my life. And this really opened up for me about almost 2 years ago. I was at a men's event, and I didn't have that type of men in my life at that time. And there was a dude who was a Navy SEAL there. I don't know about you guys. I love Navy SEALs. That's like my spirit animal. And there was a guy there, and I read his book years ago and things like this, and it was a smaller, more intimate group. At the end of the weekend, and it was just entrepreneurs there, nobody else was a Navy SEAL like him. At the end of the weekend, he said, this is the most elite group of men I've ever done life with in my life. And here's a dude who was a Navy SEAL for 8 years, trained Marcus Luttrell, trained Chris Kyle, and he just said, this is the most elite group. And I was like, does he know who I am? Like, I am a killer. And he was like, but the reason I say that is not because we can go kill people together. It's because you guys are willing to get vulnerable and we were not over there. And so I was like, wow, if you're saying that's what makes you elite, I'm like, dude. And because that was the first time he said he could get vulnerable. And since that day, it's been like, me and my buddies, we always say we get naked. It sounds weird, but it's like, yo, we need to get naked, which means we need to be just vulnerable. When we walk, I always say the most powerful person in the room is somebody who has nothing to hide, right?
Right.
When you go over there and somebody says something, man, like, I have nothing to hide about anything in my life.
Yeah.
It's freedom in that. But then you also give permission to everybody else to do the same. Because you know how many men aren't even doing it with their spouse? I'm sure you guys probably do open up as we do.
Yeah.
But most men won't open up with their spouse. Then they don't open up to their friends. Then they're just keeping these thoughts. And then when you keep these thoughts in your head, the devil's going to run with it and tell you all these lies and then spin you down a rabbit hole. You don't have nobody you're sharing with this, but if you share it with some good, solid Christian brothers, then be like, bro, that's not the truth. I see you as this. This is who God says you is. I'm watching you do this, this, and this. And here's how we can do this, this, and this. Next thing you know, you got a solution for the problem just because you were willing to get vulnerable. But if you just say, I'm having kind of an okay week, dude, you're not going to get any breakthrough, right? And so when you can get to that, boom, it's crazy what happens. And God says who can be trusted with little can be trusted with many. So then you get to the next level and he's just throwing things your way like, all right, well, let's see what you do with this.
Yeah.
Then another thing comes. And so it becomes wild just from the men's group what happens.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it on here. We have been real and raw on this podcast just because we feel like it could help people. But I don't think we've talked about this more so here. We don't have as many deep conversations as we should be having. I feel like we don't talk enough. I think it's more of that's of our own internal stuff we got to work on too, from from childhood or this or that. There's something that's guarding us from that. From really, we have a great relationship. We talk and we do communicate. To say we have a bunch of deep conversations, things like that, we don't. To where I want that, but it's like, where do you start for that, and how do you do that properly when you haven't really done that your whole relationship? Like I said, we communicate well.
But we communicate well, but it's certain things that we have a hard time communicating.
Yeah.
Exactly like our, church faith based. Like it's hard to, like, okay, what's the next step? Or if we're feeling this way, a certain way, sometimes I think we pull back because we don't know what like the next step is, or to push it the next step.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm sure there's a lot of people in that
right
in that point in their life.
Yeah.
And for us, I'm like, man, I just don't know how or what to go head in, because I know every time I'm in church and they talk about certain things, like, man, it hits you, and I feel it there, and then I think about it, and then we're on to the next thing, being busy, which it's, and we talked about that too. Like, man, you got to slow down before God does something to slow you down purposely for you to realize that. And, like I said, that's things that, man, it really racks my brain. I really think about these kind of things, especially for our kids' sake as well. So I'm just kind of interested what you kind of tell people for that, but just maybe some words of advice to us that could help others.
Well, first, like, we were in a similar spot, right? Because a good marriage, we never had a bad marriage. It was just kind of like, I always thought it probably was a 10 out of 10, and then like,
once we got to a 10 out of 10, we were like, okay, it wasn't a 10 out of 10.
We didn't argue, we had no arguments. We still had sex, but like I said, it was kind of lukewarm sex, and I didn't get vulnerable. She didn't get vulnerable. And I just don't know. I didn't think I knew how either, because my parents never did it with me, and none of my friendships were doing it, so I just didn't know it was a thing. But then once we started doing it, it was wild. Right before right after that accident happened, was in the January of 2020. Well, then COVID hits, right? So it was about to be a wild time, but it was like the best year of our life, right? So it was just crazy how like all the worst things were the best things for us. But during that time, because COVID hit, we started going on a nightly walk. And so it's the one thing that we tell everybody: if you can non-negotiable, 20 minutes, at least 20 minutes, you don't have to go more, you can. We typically go a little bit longer. Yeah. But every night we have at least 20 minutes of non-negotiable, uninterrupted time. The kids can't interrupt us. There's no phones. There's no TV. We do it on a walk just because it gives us out of the house. We get to the blood's flowing.
Your mind's not sidetracked by like things that need to get done in the house. The dishes need to be done.
Kids aren't coming in and asking you things. And because of that, we eventually ran out of surface level things to talk. Then it was like one day maybe I shared just a hair more. then she shared a hair more. It was just so, it was just like learning anything. It was just slow. Now I can just go to like 100 miles an hour and tell her the craziest thing that I'm thinking, and same with her, because we're professionals at it now, because we've done it for so many years
long.
of 20
This is
minutes.
reps, yeah.
Right. So you're right, the reps. So that's what we always tell our couples is like, you have to be non-negotiable with this. You can't say, well, I'm too busy to do this, and that. If it actually means that important to you, you'll do it, right? Like nobody's never once not picked their kids up from school, no matter what you've made sure they picked up.
Yeah.
But when it comes to this, they come with an excuse. And what I always say is like 5 out of 7 days a week is 71%. Nobody wants a 71% marriage or life or fulfillment. So if you do it every day, you're going to do 100%. By that time, you will get so comfortable at doing that, you'll start to get there. You'll start sharing things. We're so big on listening to personal development podcasts, or like we said, reading the Bible, or reading other books. I'll share her, babe, I read this today and this kind of hit me this way. I'll share about the book. Then that gets her thinking. She shares it with me. Because of that, now we're talking about new things, which then shares vulnerability of it. She gets to understand me. I get to understand her. So then we never argue about anything, because I understand all of her emotions.
Yeah.
But then I see her tell me some dark things, and then I see her do something to defeat that. Like, I'm just like mind blown of like, whoa, you are an amazing woman. I had no idea you were even capable of doing it, or vice versa. If she sees me fearful of something and then I make it happen, she's championing me like no other. But she had, if I didn't tell her what was going on, she would have no idea that I just battled something and went through it. She would just think it was another day. So there's so much more intimacy in that. And so what I would say is, one, it doesn't matter where you are. You could be 85 and start this, right? But two, just make it non-negotiable and start just going on it, and just get those reps in daily, and you will start opening up more and more and more and more. And I promise you, there's levels of deepness that you just didn't know were there.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And as the Bible says, to become one. When you really, really become one, it's wild what happens in your relationship, and not only just the intimacy, but like the opportunities that God places in your life, because you're pulling both in the same direction and kind of doing different lives. So
Yeah.
that kinda
No,
gives
that's
you a little-
good, man. Like I said, I and I'm not afraid to talk about it, because, like I said, I feel like that's something I didn't know where to start. It's like, man, what do you do? But like, I think having this stuff that you're talking about, that would be a great place to start. To at least that we both are conscious of it. We both know. So at least that's out. We've gotten this out in the air.
Yeah.
Really since doing this podcast, because like I said, I'm just like, hey, I'm going to talk about stuff that's real. And we've been getting good comments of people's like, man, I love hearing this. It speaks to me, because we're thinking the same thing, happens, same things to us. So that's one thing why I wanted to do this podcast, is really just, it's kind of our therapy of our own too, of us talking more. And this opens that door, which is funny. We're more vulnerable talking on camera versus to ourselves. But
Intimately,
if this,
right?
if this helps us, then it is what it is,
Then keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, man. Like I said, it's I don't know. It's I'm not afraid to talk about it. It's just more, I think, the fear or the vulnerability or not knowing where to start. That's just where I'm at mentally. So.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm really curious of like, why you guys don't open up more. Is it because it's just like you're saying, you're not out of practice? Is it because you think maybe they're going to think you're a weird or something because you're saying something?
No,
or you're
I
less
think
than?
it's just.
What?
I think it's just how we were raised, I guess. Like, I mean, like, I don't know, because, like, I mean, he grew up in church, I grew up in a church setting. I mean, we grew up Catholic, we were in CCD, all kind of stuff like that. But so, I guess whenever we found each other, I mean,
We're talking about each other.
I know
Yeah,
about
okay.
each other. I guess, I don't know, we just never were.
Yeah, I didn't have that. I didn't talk. Like, I didn't have these talks with my parents,
Right.
or I didn't have that. It was always kind of face value with everything. And I think, I don't know what past trauma I have in my mind as a kid or something that's keeping from that, but something is.
Right.
And that's another point. Like, too, working on yourself to find out what I'm internalizing that can't let me get that out, which I know, and like I said, I love Crystal, and we're close and we can talk, but it's still, I almost feel like I shouldn't feel self-conscious to talk to her but I still get those feelings sometimes. So, right or wrong, but that's just what it is. And it's probably the same for her. So we're both sitting in here freaking Mexican standoff kind of deal, We're not having the conversations like I feel like we should. I thought that's why it was important to talk to you guys, just kind of, see what you guys are doing and what we can do to help ourselves.
Yeah, just being in that environment, right? Because it is weird, right? Like it's almost like a job interview or something, right? Like you're prepared for it, but as soon as you get in front of people, you're almost like and you just almost can freeze up or something like that. And so it's almost the same thing. It's not that you're intimidated or whatnot. You're just out of practice with it and just getting to do it.
Especially when it's been so long. If it's been, it's been like that, like
Your
the
whole
whole
life,
marriage, or your whole life, then you're not
know.
comfortable doing it, so you don't know where to start.
Or how
And I think that's where we're at. But what we have acknowledged that I think this is as of late, we've been talking about that. So we know there's the problem.
Right.
We know that we want to fix it. Now we're like, okay, how? Okay, I think throwing some of these non-negotiable things in there, doing stuff like that. I think I've only prayed out loud once or twice in front of Crystal at church. We had certain things in church where you doing communion with the kids, and I said a prayer with the family.
And I'm like, go Dale.
And it's still
because I don't hear it. I'm like, you go. I can't go. You go, because I pray all the time in my head, but not out loud. But so that's
it's a different thing.
So whenever
out loud,
he did it,
no doubt.
literally, probably he's done it twice in his whole life. I was very proud of him. Like the Lord did give you what to say. Now I do take that back. In small group I did pray a few times because our leader would go around and she wouldn't tell you who would do the closing prayer that day or the opening prayer. And oh my gosh, my palms would be so sweaty, my arm would be sweaty, and I was like, I'd be so anxious and stuff. And those handful of times that I had, I was able to do it. That's because I guess God put it in me to speak. I don't know that day, but I did it, but I didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean,
you're like, don't call on me. Don't call on me.
I was like, I'm good for another 10 rounds because there's 10 ladies, But then she would be like, all right, you could come up again next week or something,
It's so every single couple that we recommend, I would say at least 9 out of 10 that we recommend to the person, hey, pray out loud with your spouse. They're like,
what?
I'm terrible at it though. Like I don't know how to do. And I'm like, believe me, we were both there.
Yeah, and that's something I'm still working on a little bit. I still get a little bit uncomfortable with it, but we have a thing where we trade off every other night, so I don't have a choice. I have to get vulnerable with it, and do it. But for a long time, years ago, it was just him every night, and then finally I was like, okay, I've got to work up the courage to do this. And I think maybe he challenged me or something too. Like, you're ready, like you tonight.
I know. Yeah. So I know for the longest time with the kids, we would do our nightly routine and their little prayers that we would say. I guess we kind of got out of the habit, but we still do our nighttime routine without that. I know that's terrible, but we need to incorporate that back in.
I'm challenging you guys.
Yeah.
Go check back in. Challenge them.
Keep me accountable, Tommy.
Yeah.
Keep me accountable, Tommy. Yeah.
I will. Yeah. The kids need it, And
for sure.
Set them up for it, and later on, and it's just so important. It's wild of like the transformations. Like sometimes, like that I've seen, and just recently, I work with a professional fighter, fought in the UFC for many years, and literally 3 weeks into working with me, and I'm not like saying this to brag, but literally his marriage was not at a good spot. They were at each other's throats, and they hadn't had like no intimacy. And here's like a good-looking dude who's like one of the best fighters in the world, right? Like, how come he's not having sex, right? And but what was crazy, I asked him about his faith. He's like, yeah, we go to church every Sunday. And I'm like, cool. Do you pray out loud? He's like, well, that's not really my thing. I'm like, well, do you read the Bible every day? He's like, I'm just not a good reader. And I said, well, I don't want to hear either of that. And I said, I need you to implement both of these things. Literally, no joke, 4 days later, he texts me. He's like, bro, my wife's told me 2 days in a row how sexy it is that she sees me reading the Bible. She don't read the Bible, but he's like, dude. And he's like, and bro, it's like wild now how their marriage in just 3 weeks has been like, ding.
That's
and
awesome.
The two biggest things was just praying out loud and reading the Bible every day. And so it's wild.
Yeah.
Then they started having conversations. Then they had like crazy occurrences that happened in church about the certain Bible studies they were studying together. And then it would be like the next sermon at church. It was just like these crazy things that happen. Then they know how yoked they are. So it's just wild. The simplest little things can just turn into a wildfire of like goodness in our lives.
God moves.
Yeah.
Man, I know it's tough to hear because I know it's the truth. Like I know it's.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we had this conversation because one, like I said, it's something that we needed to hear. So one, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And two, we just gotta put stuff into action. We can't just keep. I go to church, I feel good. I'm like, oh man, it makes you think about certain things, and then you leave. You're like, oh, let's go get lunch, and it's back to
On
the
to the
same
next thing.
stuff,
Yeah.
And so it's so easy to do that. It's so easy to let the busyness of your lives kind of dictate stuff. Whenever I know they had a sermon just a couple weeks ago about slowing things down and really, focus on the things that are right. Get your stuff in order, and I feel like that's something we need to do as a couple too.
Yeah. Because it's like, oftentimes we think like the tools of the devil is cocaine and strippers, right? Like,
Yeah.
but oftentimes it's just busyness. If he can just get us busy and distracted, and sometimes
Get
it's
your mind off of it.
success. Yeah,
Right.
then that's all he's got to do, because then we're not like focused in. We're doing pretty good. Well, Jesus says if you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out. He doesn't say if you're an axe murderer, I'll spit you out. He says if you're
Right.
lukewarm, right? And so that's where he wants us to be all in. So like if it's convicting you, in those hearts, just step it up a little bit. And that's when people think like going in more for God means it's going to be a boring life. I can't tell you like how much better
Amazing.
our life
Yeah.
got, like more fulfilled,
Yeah.
but like even better in all aspects. Sexually, friendships, business, like all of those things got better. So it wasn't like, well, now I'm all in for God and I'm just like this boring monk who sits in the corner and prays all day. Like it could be the farthest
Yeah.
thing from that, So it's super cool what actually does happen.
I think that was always my mindset. Is like, oh man, I don't want to be that guy, and it changes me from being the same fun guy. Like I would feel like that would be a problem, But after meeting other like people and like because like I said, hey, one of the biggest things wrong with the church is overly religious people. That's the ones that you see that would turn me off as a kid. I knew from what I grew up in. But it doesn't have to be like that. You're saying it. I mean, you said you can still have your fun, be yourself, life, but just having God at the center of everything, it doesn't make you a. I'm not going to turn into a monk, and all I'm going to do is walk around and saying scripture to people. So I think that's been one of my hang-ups, So I've got to just get past that mentally. Is like it's not going to just turn me into some prude, That's not what God does to people.
I mean, if you could see the way
Yeah.
he acted all day to me,
Yeah, like, I'm
and stuff,
having the time of my
you'll know
life,
it
brother.
doesn't take that away.
No, this gives us freedom because
Yeah.
that's what the Bible talks about, is that we're all chosen specifically and uniquely. Like every single person here is for a specific reason.
Right.
So when you just step into your uniqueness, that makes us like, if we're super funny, that's God given us those talents. So why would he want us to put a light, like a lampshade on that and put us in the corner? He's saying, no, man, let it be funny.
Yeah.
Be this thing, be what you are, be your true self, and then just let that be the thing that draws them to God. Because like you're saying, it's the certain people that kind of did conform, got overly religious, and then gave the Christians a bad name. That's like, man, well, that doesn't look too fun. So it's
Right.
up to guys like us to be like, well, no, this is what a real Christian looks like, just us
Yeah.
being ourselves, and this is available for everybody. So this is a cool time where we can switch that with social media and things like that we don't just see a certain type of person. So because it becomes fun.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, I got to say thank y'all for coming on with us. This has been enlightening and helpful, I feel.
And I got a lot of advice from y'all.
Yeah,
It's good. We're going on a walk after this, and we're praying tonight.
We're gonna,
Amen.
hey, man.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, hey, we're gonna do this stuff, and I'll check in with you, Tommy, for
Me
sure. But like I said, hey, where can people find you guys at on all your socials and things like that, just so we can get that out there?
Yeah, the best is just through my Instagram. Diane
Yeah.
has one, but we mainly use mine. It's just Tommy McCollister on Instagram is the best way to just find our stuff and content. And if they want to join our coaching or things like that, we have one-on-one stuff, and then we have something that's available for everybody as well. So that's the best way.
Okay.
Awesome.
Well, good, man. We'll
Good.
make sure to send this out. This episode is actually going to come out this week on Thursday, so this is a
Nice.
quick turnaurn for us.
Yeah. We
But
appreciate
like I
you
said,
guys.
yeah,
Thank
no,
you so
man.
much.
For having us
Yeah,
on. You guys
thank
are
you.
you guys are an amazing couple, and we're going to be tuning into your guys' show now.
Yeah.
On that for sure.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna implement some of these non-negotiables, Tommy, and we'll make sure that we let you and Diane know how things are going for us, and I'll let you know. You can help keep me accountable for sure.
Yeah, I will.
Yes.
I'll be checking in for sure. So
Yeah. Well,
Cool,
thank y'all
guys.
for y'all.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for your
Thank
time,
you.
man. We'll stay in touch,
Definitely.
guys.
yeah.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you so
God bless
much.
you. Bye, guys.
Bye.